Go. Okay, perfect. Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of David Talks Buffs, third interview, and this is one of big honor, bringing on someone that I have watched for years in the YouTube space, though he just met me. And this is Bill Carroll. He is the director of HBCU scouting at Consensus Draft, and also a contributor on a handful of different platforms, including the NBS Draft Central, Zenny 62 Media, which you can find here on YouTube as well as on the ATB network. So thank you so much, Bill Carroll, for being here. It is greatly appreciated.
I greatly appreciate this as well. We're about to talk about one of the most interesting experiments in football history because no one's ever tried it this way ever before. And as you probably know, a lot of coaches were very much against the transfer portal. Dabo Swinney being the most notable because he was the loudest about it, but he wasn't the only one. Saban was initially kind of, as he is, right, from the Belichick tree, initially he was like, I don't know about this. Once he saw the advantages of it, oh, I'm all in, right? I mean, he went from, what's the old saying, 0 to 100? That's what he was on this. He was like, I get good players from other people and they're ready to play right away, right? But no one's been as aggressive, and maybe no one will ever be as aggressive, depending on if it works or not, as this. So you and I talked briefly off air. I went just to satisfy my curiosity and looked at the two deep from last year and looked at two deep from this year. There are 5 survivors, or whatever term you want to use. You could do a reality TV show about the players, right, who survived.
Absolutely.
5 on the 2 deep from last year to this year that are the same guys. Everyone else, the other 39 out of 44, came from someplace else.
Yes.
It's never been done this way before.
No.
It's a little bit almost like disconcerting. But I'm excited about it also. And you get to cover something that's never been tried before. And so a year from now, we'll either be talking about, wow, can you believe he pulled it off? Or, woo, as I said, you'll either end up changing college football forever, or it'll be just one heck of a 30 for 30.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I tell my, my audience all the time, because sometimes we'll have people that are skeptical, some people that are like, we're going 12-0 next year, all of that. But what I usually try to say is, like, one thing we can all agree on is that we are all going to love watching this whole thing unfold. So I want to go back to before Coach Prime officially took the job. What was your assessment of how he was running the Jackson State program? And then when you started to hear that Colorado was in the mix, your initial thoughts on that?
To Deion's credit, he said all along that, what's the old saying? Since I'm quoting various rap lyrics, here for a good time, not a long time. He may not have said it in quite so many words, but he was never going to retire at Jackson State. Everybody should have known that. But he did 2 things that he did promise to do. One is he made people who had never watched Jackson State football before watch Jackson State football. Mm-hmm. They have more eyes on that program than they'd ever had before. I've been watching Jackson State since probably 72, 73, because when I was a kid, and this is how different the world is, that there used to be something called the Eddie Robinson football show. And Coach Eddie Robinson had a show that was syndicated nationwide. And they would take the game and shorten it up, right? It would be, sped up. So you could watch basically, most of the game. And then at what was halftime, which is about 40 or so minutes in, he and the interviewer would talk about players and game, whatever. And if they're playing Jackson State, they talk about Walter Payton, obviously, because Walter Payton was an unstoppable killing machine. And they had Robert Brazile on that same team. So 2 Hall of Fame level players were teammates at Jackson State when I was a kid watching the Eddie Robinson show. So even if Jackson State wasn't ever on nationwide television, which they weren't in those days, you at least had this nationwide show that was syndicated, at least throughout the American South. I don't know about, I didn't live in the North in those days, but okay. I moved around the South when I was a kid, and everywhere in the South, you could watch the Eddie Robinson show. It would come on Saturday mornings prior to college football games. Like it would be like 11-ish Eastern time, probably. Yeah, about 11 Eastern time. And they would cram it all in an hour. The interviews, the everything, and the game would be, like I said, sped up and shortened up. So Jackson State is now in the nation's eyes for the first time in a long time. They've been great players and great coaches in Jackson State for decades, going back to the 20s. But most of America, particularly white America, wasn't aware of them, except for people who are really football people. Like if you're a serious football person, you knew about some of the great players that Jackson State produced. So money and eyeballs. He promised those two things. He delivered those two things. And as a bonus, he got them the number one football player in the country. So, I mean, I don't know how else to say it than that never could happen without him. There's no other series of things that could have happened to Jackson State would have gotten Travis Hunter there. Yeah. So he did the things he promised to do. Nobody could have imagined that he would stay longer than 3 years, probably at the longest. I would have been shocked if he stayed 3 years even, but he stayed about as long as I expected. And you heard schools nibbling around at the edges almost immediately. I mean, it didn't take long. Once he showed, that he was going to get things rolling, even before the end of the first year, there were teams kind of circling around. Florida State always has lurked in the background, obviously, because he's from Florida State. And they haven't really found the next Bobby Bowden there yet. There's still, things are firming up there, but it's not, they're a spoiled program, David, let's be honest. Yeah. And they kind of think they're entitled to contend for the national title every year, which hasn't happened for a while. And when Prime started having success and doing it in a flashy manner, because that's how he does everything. Of course. He does everything, right? Big time programs. Miami, always kind of like, we weaken, like we take away the life force from our enemy, right? That's sort of like a Sith move. We can somehow convert him, you know what I mean? Yeah. So a lot of the big time Florida programs who weren't completely in love with their coaching situation have always sniffed around him, and then some other big time programs. So the only thing that surprised me about him ending up in Colorado, I thought he'd end up somewhere in the warm weather. That's the only thing that made Colorado a bit of a surprise. This will be the first time he has wintered in a cold weather environment in his life. He's played in cold weather games. He's never lived in a cold weather environment. So we'll see how that part goes. But he'll probably learn to love it. Here's the thing you get when you bring on Deion Sanders. One is you already seen it. This, right? That part. The gear is selling like it hasn't sold in 30 years practically. Yeah. Ticket sales, which were, I'm not trying to insult you in any way, but there wasn't a great resale market previously for Colorado football tickets. What's the old joke? I left a couple of tickets on my right, somebody broke in and left me two more. Yeah. But so now there's like brisk sales, students and parents, and even people who just live in the area who haven't been to a game in years are going. So already it's a win, right? Even if you win 4 games, look at the balance sheet. Like you're still a winner. Plus you won 1 last year. So 4 is still a dramatic improvement. And I think 5 even is possible. People who are talking about like 8 wins, those people should probably slow down. I don't think you realize how much work there was to be done in this program. And Deion himself was like a bit taken aback in like conditioning and speed. Like it was different from what he was used to. Yes. Even at Jackson State, he had more team speed. I'm not trying to be mean, but he had a bunch of dudes who can run 4.5, 4.4, 4.3, even a few. And he gets to Colorado, it's like, like some of these guys can't outrun me, and I'm 53. Like that was a bit of a surprise to him that he could keep up with probably a decent number of scholarship athletes. Yep. So the dramatic turnaround, look at what he decided to do. Some of them are offensive and defensive linemen, but look at how much ridiculous change took place at the speed positions. He said, I don't have speed at the speed positions. I want speed at the speed positions. He comes in and he tells the young man, hey, If you want to stay here, work really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But you aren't all going to make it. I mean, he's not lying to them. You think Nick Saban hasn't given basically the same speech before? I promise you, every time he's taken a new job, he has.
Thank you.
Alabama, LSU, Michigan State, every place he's coached, he may have said it slightly differently, probably way less flash, but the message is still the same. Things are going to change around here, and some of you just won't make it. If you are a guy that wants to treat football the way that you've treated football in the past, you're not going to make it. This has to become an overwhelming obsession. You have to be a person that gets up earlier, stays up later, studies harder, lifts more, runs more, does everything more. If you're willing to up your level of everything by 30-something, 40-something%, then you can survive. Hey, 5 guys made it. 5 made it. But this is going to be a tough transition. You're going to lose some games that you thought you might win just because there's so much, especially on like the offensive line, there's so much newness. Yeah. I mean, I'm joking barely, but there's guys going to be taking the field with name tags on. Like, hi, I'm your right guard. I mean, it's rough. The good news is, my prediction is that it's going to look really bad at first. And people are going to be like, grumble, grumble, grumble. And then about 5 weeks in, you're going to start to see some things. You're going to probably win at least one game that you probably didn't expect to win.
I'm hoping that's USC. We've never beat them in our existence.
Yes. I don't know if that's the one you should circle, David, but you may want to set your sights slightly lower. Here's what I will tell you about that USC game. Don't be too shocked if your defensive secondary doesn't make at least 1 or 2 great plays, though. Like, I think you're going to see, I mean, obviously Travis Hunter is special, and you only have one of him because there's only one of him to be had.
Yeah.
But being around him and seeing what he does, some guys who maybe didn't think it was possible to be that good will say, oh, let me see if I can do that thing he did. Okay, I can't do it as well as he did it, right? Because he's better than I am. Like, guys will think like that. But in the back of your mind, you kind of know who's super special, who's good, and who's, hey, we're out here to play football. Travis Hunter and having Deion Sanders around are going to make some of those defensive backs, some of those corners who didn't realize it was possible to be that good, right, are going to say, I wonder if I could, right? And so they'll stay later. They'll do things. They'll study more tape. So you're going to see more plays made in the back half of the defense. The one thing I'm concerned about is your pass rush or lack thereof. Yep. I don't think there's an immediate answer there. So you're still going to give, like I said, Caleb Williams may not be the guy that you're going to have I think there'll be maybe a tip ball interception in there for fun. Like, so hold on to that. So. Hold on to that. But if you can't get consistent pressure on a guy like him, it's going to be a long day at the office. But hey, teams like Nebraska, there's some teams that you have something for. So I'm going to walk through the schedule real quick, and I'm going to walk through the depth chart real quick.
Yes, let's do it.
So Travis Hunter, circle, star, smiley face, pick whatever kind of GIF. Watch him a lot. He's going to play wide receiver. He's like cornerback. He's probably going to return some punts and kickoffs in certain situations. He's the kind of guy you get on the field.
Do you think a Heisman is in the cards at some point?
Well, that's a fascinating question. I don't think he'll stay in college long enough. In the old days, the answer might have been yes, like by his senior year, but he won't be a senior in college. He'll be in the pros by that point. Here's the things that I will say about a guy like Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
People talk about his physical ability, which is impressive, but what impresses me most is his mental ability. He has learned offenses and defenses quickly, right? And he can take on new assignments. When they tell him, hey, can you play some nickel? Sure. He learns nickel. So here's a guy who can legitimately play 3 positions at a high level. If you want to play safety, I'm sure you can learn that too, but it seems like kind of a waste. So that's a guy that even if you aren't a Buffalo, a Colorado Buffalo fan, watch this guy.
Yeah.
Watch number 12. He's going to be in the NFL for a while. And I like the depth behind him at wide receiver. Xavier Weaver is less well known because he's not Travis Hunter, but he's a really good football player. Things that I like about him, obviously, another Florida kid, former South Florida player.
Yep.
Never really got fully maximized at South Florida, frankly, because their quarterback situation was what's the word I'm looking for?
Still better than CU's last year. I'll give them
Oh,
props.
right. Also true. Yes. I mean, both things can be true. You could not be great and still, yes, right. Well, so well said.
But you're definitely right.
Steven Montez, wherefore art thou?
I know, right?
Yeah. We hardly knew ye. But yeah, Weaver is a kid that's got that sort of rangy, thin-ish, but plays stronger than you might expect for a guy with his kind of build. He's not afraid, despite being a sort of thinner-bodied guy, to go into difficult places. His father played in the NFL for 4 years with the Chargers, so he's another guy with NFL bloodlines. Watch for him, because all the attention paid to Travis. Watch for him to have some big games, 2 or 3 big games. I think he's going to have at least 2 or 3 100-plus yard games. He's going to have at least 1 or 2 touchdown games, because everyone's sort of freaked out about Travis Hunter. So I won't be surprised if he's the leading receiver 3 or 4 times this year.
Okay.
And he's a better player than most people realize. So that's a guy I would also put the circle or whatever around.
Real quick, Bill, before I forget, before we get off of Travis too much, in terms of his NFL potential, do you see him playing more, being drafted as a corner or more of a wide receiver? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, NFL teams might do some fun stuff in certain packages with him too, just because he's so versatile. But every scout I've ever talked to said that kid's a corner, like no hesitation. Here's the thing. The things he's learning as a wide receiver will help him as a corner, right? The mindset, the wide receiver mindset, all those things are going to help him. But the things that he's good at as a corner, he's great at as a corner. I mean, good at as a receiver, he's great at as a corner. So there's a step up, basically, that when you see him play corner, you see rare things. He's a good wide receiver, but he wouldn't be a top 10 wide receiver in this draft class. If you were in this draft class, but he would be definitely in the fight for the number 1 corner in this draft class, or really most draft classes.
Yeah.
He's special as a corner. He's good, very good, even perhaps as a receiver, but it's just a different level of refinement.
Yeah. Understood. Real quick then.
Yeah.
Could we talk a little bit about the running back position?
We must. That was once a strength, believe it or not, at Colorado. You've got a couple of guys, who, I mean, obviously a Heisman Trophy winner or 2. You've had terrific running backs going back for decades. And then things happened. And you went from having, I mean, I liked Broussard a lot when he was there. Jarek Broussard was a guy that I thought had potential to be a terrific collegiate running back. Didn't get maximized. Well, actually had 2 really great seasons, but still just the program didn't allow him to be showcased, I guess, is the way you probably
I agree with that.
It wasn't anyone's real fault except just general talent level on the team. And running back is a very sort of dependent position. I mean, you could be Bo Jackson, but Bo Jackson can't be Bo Jackson if the team around him is terrible. Like you'll be people will say, "Oh man, wow, that guy runs hard, but he just lost 2 yards." Like if people aren't getting there, I mean, one of the least appreciated, in fact, the least appreciated part of football is probably run blocking. People even sort of appreciate pass protection a little bit because you watch the quarterback, so you get to sort of pay attention to pass protection. People rarely, when the running back gets the ball, they stop looking at anything but the running back. If you were to watch the offensive line, which people tend not to do, you quickly see why some running backs are productive and some aren't, because while Barry Sanders comes along once ever, where if 2 or 3 guys make it in the backfield, he makes both guys miss and still picks up 5 or 6 yards. That's not something people do. That's something Barry Sanders does. So you can't ask your running backs to do that. For a running back to be consistently productive, he has to at least be able to get to the line of scrimmage without having to worry about making people miss. Now, once you get to the line of scrimmage, you have to pick the right place to go. And then you might make somebody miss in the hole. That's expected. Hey, that's going to happen. But once you make that one guy miss in the hole, something really good should happen. And if you're going to run some ISO stuff where, even if you don't really have a fullback, which you do, you actually one of the teams that still has a fullback. Once again, a guy who came from someplace else.
Yep.
At least someone slipped on the depth chart is another guy that a lot of immigrants. But that's the whole point of having a fullback, is to have that person who can lead in those ISO situations, hopefully to take the running back, to extra yards, but even more importantly, be that secret service, that protector.
Yes.
And if your running back depth, we'll talk about Alton McCaskill. In fact, we'll talk about him now.
Yeah.
So when he was at Houston, I saw some real flashes, right? You saw a young man that had the ability to catch the ball. You saw a young man that, speaking of South Florida, had a monster game against South Florida while he was there. Had a really good game against Grambling, which I watched because I watch, obviously Grambling a lot.
Yeah.
And he's got size. He's not a little back. He's a guy with some size. He's got good speed. He's very versatile. With the exception of the ACL year, which he tore in spring ball prior to the 2022 season, that's the only real sort of ding on him, is that one ACL tear, which he came back from. From everything I've learned, apparently came back from as good, if not better, than ever before in terms of conditioning, strength, speed, etc. So you're going to get the best running back you've probably had in 4 or 5 years in terms of new guys. And the only question now is, can your run blocking, which is going to be a bit of a project at first, can it also help him to show what he can do? And then other guys on the depth chart that are worth discussing, you've got a couple. Like the running back depth is also better. Now, once again, first of all, Kvasse Smoke. First of all, member of the all-name team. How do you not love that name? And he's had some games where he showed up and looked good.
Yeah.
He doesn't quite have the same sort of long speed or agility. He's a sort of, he's a little more of a bludgeoner as a running back.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. He's a little more of a, runs to darkness as opposed to runs to daylight kind of guy. But he's no fun to tackle.
No.
And he's a kid with that's great natural toughness. I'm going to compare him to another very similar back who even went to Kentucky in Benny Snell. So that no nonsense, I might make a cut. I might say, no, I don't need to make a cut. You want to meet me in the hole? Sure, let's do this. And he's a guy that late in games, you could see sometimes when people make a business decision on him, like, game's basically won/lost. I guess I could look like I'm making an effort, but I don't plan to throw my shoulder in there too much. Like, this guy is no fun to take on. So I think he's going to be that short yardage, goal line, we need a yard and a half in a tough situation kind of guy. And he'll obviously spell McCaskill. And then beyond him, it's still probably a little bit of a fight. But I guess the next guy up is probably Dylan Edwards. And that's, once again, yet another, like I said, immigrant, another person who's coming to the shores of there. He's a small guy. He's a guy who might even be asked to line up in the slot because he can catch the ball a little bit, and he's quick. He needs to spend a little time in the weight room, and he's a kid. A kid. Like, what is he? I don't even know if he's 19 yet. I think
he just got here for spring.
He's a kid.
And then I don't know if you've seen this, Bill, because this is still pretty recent news as of the last week, but the Jackson State running back, sy'veon Wilkerson, is here as well.
Yep. And he was a very late ad.
Yeah.
So hopefully he'll figure out the playbook and stuff, right? It's spring ball's over. So I guess he'll be getting those mental reps. I guess I guess they brought back NCAA, right? I guess he'll be bringing up the DB offense. I don't know.
They need the VR going. That's what they need.
Get the VR going, all that good stuff. But it's big time, obviously, with the running backs coach. But the good news is that's another guy who's got experience, another guy who's got a little bit of turn the corner and a little bit of big playability to him. And he also runs hard. So he gives you a little bit of both, a little bit of the, I can, he's a little bit of a blend between the two, right? He's not quite as exciting as McCaskill, but he's not quite as no frills, I guess, as smoke. He's between the two.
Yeah.
And can catch the ball a little bit too. So yeah, he'll be in there fighting for scraps, I think is the term I would use. I think the top two guys are going to get the vast majority of the work, I would expect. But hey, you need depth because injuries happen.
Absolutely. And this is a good segue over to what a big thing that I've wanted to hear your thoughts on is, it's very important, I think, too, that with Wilkerson here, Shedeur, has somebody in that backfield that he has rapport and trust with. But, I really want to hear your thoughts on Shedeur, not only for this season, but also his NFL potential. I did a video maybe a few weeks ago at this point on when or just comparing his stats at the FCS level to other first-round picks such as Carson Wentz, Trey Lance, going back to Joe Flacco. And it's really cool that he has the opportunity to prove himself at the Power 5 level even before jumping to the NFL.
Yeah, so this is a great situation for him. And he, once again, I'm not trying to be unpleasant, but he goes into a situation where expectations are managed. At least they should be. At least initially, right? At least initially, the expectations should be managed. He reminds me a bit of, though he's more athletic, but a bit of Teddy Bridgewater in that he does a lot from the neck up that I don't think everybody catches.
Mm-hmm.
He's really good at getting off of his first read, for especially a guy as young as he is. He does a good job of moving through his reads. He is a very good decision maker. Occasionally he gets a little stubborn and tries to make a throw that he probably shouldn't attempt. But every young quarterback, especially when they really have high confidence, will do that. But mostly his decision-making is rock solid more often than not. Mm-hmm. Oh, somebody else agrees with me. I love that. You're very smart then. If you said
Teddy Bridgewater, he said it.
Officially smart guy then. He navigates the pocket well. He'll flush out, but he doesn't do it early. Even though he's a good athlete, he looks to hang in the pocket as long as possible. He tries to show people, I'm a passer. And he is. He can run, but he's clearly a passer. He clearly wants to win from the pocket and does more often than not. I'd like to see him see ahead of his throws a little bit more sometimes. He's gotten away with some things in the past he will not get away with against Oregon or some of these other teams he's going to be facing, but he'll learn that. He's a smart kid who'll pick those things up. I want to see him get in the weight room a little bit more too. Like Teddy, he sometimes looks like parts of his body don't quite look NFL-ish yet. But Teddy still looks a little wispy. So, hey, some guys are just naturally thin. But I'd like to see him put on, about, 5-6 pounds here, 10 to 12 from here down. So if he can get his body to about 218, 216, somewhere in the mid to upper teens. I don't know what they list him at, but I'm willing to bet he's less than he's listed. Yeah. I've learned over time that, yeah, right. There's a little bit of that. Yeah, look at you, Nicholas, whoever you are, we need to talk. I agree with almost every single one of the things you said. Here's what I will say. The offense he's been in actually gave him even more freedom than Alex Smith's offense that he ran at Utah, which was under Urban Meyer, and really sort of kept him. They were one of the first teams to really, really use a lot of, the zone read option. That wasn't. They had a quarterback who could run, but they wanted to zone read you to put your guys in a bind to throw over their heads eventually. They liked the daggers. Teams that had zone read option before that were mostly trying to run on you, like even back at West Virginia and places like that. Back when Coach Rodriguez, who shout out to a friend of mine who I follow and I've gotten to know a little bit and even had him on my show years ago, a guy named Jed Drenning, was the quarterback at Glenville State who accidentally invented zone read. So the zone read option was literally a botched play. So Jed Drenning was a senior quarterback when a very young Rich Rodriguez got his first head coaching job at Division II college in West Virginia called Glenville State.
Okay.
And they're running a play where he bobbles the ball and then tries to put it in the belly of the running back, pulls it back out because he doesn't have a good handle on it. And then, and then runs a little option off of it. And Coach Rodriguez blows his whistle, pulls him over, what'd you just do there? And it's So the next day he comes back and says, I got some things, got some ideas, whatever. So that's the birth of zone read option, Glenville State, 30 odd years ago. So that's how it happened. Shout out to Jed Drenning, who is at the Signal Caller, if you want to check him out on Twitter.
Okay.
Terrific guy. So that's how, but zone read option was originally mostly about run, like most options, about run first, and you could pass off it if you really wanted to, but it was really about running. When Utah was one of the first teams to start getting big plays in the passing game downfield off of it. That was the Urban Meyer wrinkle, because Urban Meyer, former receiver himself, coached receivers, loved having receivers have good days at the office, and he had some good receivers at the time. Okay, so back to what you're asking me. Shedeur Sanders, what could he be? I think worst case scenario, he's a high level spot starter to high level backup, but I think he has a chance to be an NFL starter for years.
Yeah.
Two things will determine that. I'd like to see him get a little more zip on those deep outside the numbers throws, which are hard throws to make, especially from certain sides of the field. He's a guy whose body is still sort of developing, as I said. So I think he's going to get stronger in that like trunk, waist, because people say arm strength, but it's not really your arm, right? The power that goes into throws really comes from trunk rotation, the sort of where your thighs and hips meet, and that explosion in that area. Mm-hmm. So while we don't think of quarterbacks as strong, but if you get close to it, a person actually playing the NFL at the quarterback position, you notice how much power they have in certain parts of their body. Even a guy that we kind of think of like a goofus, right? Walk up to Eli Manning and like punch him in the side right around this area, and you realize, oh, he's got like enormous muscles in his like mid back, and like he doesn't look like an athlete to some extent, but he's much stronger. Like you don't want to like get on a rowing machine next to Eli Manning and try to row with him, right? Yeah. The muscles that you throw with are very similar to the muscles that you row with, and so you see like these muscles through here on a NFL quarterback, and they are impressive, even if the guy is a smaller guy. Doug Flutie's not a big dude, but look at his mid back sometime, and it's like, is that a boxer? Right. I mean, enormously developed muscles through this part of the back and where the shoulders tie in. Okay, enough of the physiology lesson. So, if Shedeur gets a little physically stronger, if Shedeur gets a little more patient sometimes in certain things he looks for, but it's about when to be patient, because sometimes he's too patient. Like it's risk reward. There's times when you just have to say, oh, there's 5 free yards to my check down. Let's just take it. He does to force big plays at times. Yes, exactly. Thank you. Exactly. Check downs are winning. Winning is check downs. Check downs are winning, and winning is check down. Peyton Manning says that when I went from being a guy with a lot of potential to a great quarterback, I realized that check downs are your friend, right? That you don't have to impress everybody with every throw. And if you dump a ball off to a guy like Alton McCaskill, that can be a big play, even if you're throwing the ball 4 yards, because he might break a tackle, make somebody miss. Boom. Now he's 20 yards downfield. So if he gets through, as my buddy Mr. Braxton just said, realize when it's based on down and distance and the situation. Is this a situation where I can try to hold the ball a half second longer, try to get something downfield, or should I just get it out of my hands? And more often than not, the answer is get the ball out of your hands. There are times where maybe you're in a max protect situation. Hey, we went 2 tight ends. We're keeping them both in the block. I think I can work the ball down a little further, or things like that. We got a double move on. I think he can beat this guy. Travis Hunter's going to, shake route this guy. And I can just hold a little bit longer. I can navigate in the pocket. I can slide up. I can get the ball. But that's situational. Most of the time, if there's free yards, take them. He's got to get that into like, oh, there's 4 yards, 6 yards. If you're getting 6, 7, 4, 3, 7, 6, that's winning, right? Because that's every couple of plays is a first down. If you're getting a first down every other play, you're going to win. You don't have to make big plays to win. Okay, yes. What's your next question?
Well, this is a good segue because, again, Nick is like reading both of our minds right now. With Shedeur and having to work on these things, how do what's your assessment on this new offense that he's in?
So I'm a huge Sean Lewis fan. And when they went flash fast, right, when he was in the MAC, it was one of the most fun offenses I've ever seen in my life. And it's going to, one, exhaust defenses. It's also going to exhaust your offensive line. So
at altitude too.
Yes, exactly. So it's going to be a real test of conditioning. Some guys are going to drop some weight. If they haven't already, I think I saw somewhere that like there's at least 4 members of the team who lost 30 or more pounds or something like that. So I'm not shocked to hear that. Offensive linemen are going to end up reshaping their bodies, their minds, and their heart and lungs, because you're going to snap the ball every 11 seconds. I mean, that's going to test your abilities you're going to have to, and depth. So you have to develop depth also. So remember I said earlier about there'll be some ugly early in the season. That's part of it, because you're going to play some depth because you're going so fast. You'll change up it's not all fast, but at times when you're getting people on the run, he likes to, right? When the defense looks unsettled, he gets very aggressive. It's like, okay, let's go faster until you're going as fast as you can go. And the good news is that means defenses are simple, right? It makes it very easy because you can't change. You're going too fast. You're stuck in whatever coverage you're in. You can't get people on and off the field. Your pass rush is wiped out 5 plays into the drive because you're snapping the ball again. Wait, hold on, right? And as you said, altitude. If you're coming from USC, little different situation than that. So that's the one thing that gives you a chance is some of these teams are not used to going that fast. In fact, most of these teams are not used to going that fast. Even the teams that think they've gone up tempo have gone up tempo at about 40% slower than this kind of up tempo. It's different. It's the fastest offense I saw last year before he came here. It was a real interesting move for him to, it's not even a lateral move, right? And he goes from being a head coach and a head coach on the rise, right? I mean, he had some buzz around his name. That, to me, that was the most, of all the things that have happened, the most surprising that Deion managed to pull off was this one. Way to go. To get Sean Lewis, who was getting some bigger, maybe not top tier, but mid-tier head coaching stuff was starting to sort of coalesce around him in the sort of upper levels of Group of 5 and even lower level Power 5 programs were like, right? So for him to pull him in as a coordinator, that's a huge get.
Yeah.
You're probably only going to have him for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So enjoy that. But hopefully you can train up another assistant to run the offense, because he will be somebody's head coach soon.
Yes. Yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you on that. One question about this offense that I'm wondering your perspective on is that I've noticed that the second most ball carrier or whatever the last couple of years in the offense has been the quarterback. Now, it probably has to do with the fact that probably the arm talent isn't at the level of probably Shedeur, but do you think we'll see more 2-back sets? How do you think they'll use Shedeur in terms of option rollouts, stuff like that?
You'll still continue to see, good old fashioned, read option. You'll see some called quarterback runs, some quarterback draws. Deion's not afraid to run his son, but he runs his son judiciously.
Yeah.
Partially because that's his starting quarterback, and partially because that's his blood. I think both those things come together in his play calling. But Shedeur is not afraid to run and is a good runner, as we talked about. But you're not going to run him, 20 times a game. He's not young Cam Newton. But could you see up to 8 or 9 in a game, especially if you need it? Sure, you could see that. I think it'll be more in that 5 or 6 range most times.
Yeah.
Called. Like, he'll take off sometimes when it's not a call, but it's about called runs, but intentional runs. But there'll be times when no one's open or he gets flushed in the pocket. I don't really count those. Those are really passing plays that broke down. But called runs, probably 5 or 6, I'm guessing. And then occasionally, when you need it, and a team is playing in such a way that it's open, like they're playing a lot of man coverage. Oh, you want to play man? Okay. Go. Take it. Take the free yards. Don't leave free yards sitting there. And I think you're going to see, sometimes some moving pocket stuff. Yeah. Look. Who is this, Nicholas? So Nicholas, you and I need to talk. You and I need to spend some time together. Yes. So the difference, of course, is the slow mesh thing, right? Clausen has that super slow, like, will they, won't they thing, while it's a more traditional mesh with the Sean Lewis offense. But yes, there's some real similarities there. And here's what I'm looking for from Shedeur this year. As you said, just take your checkdowns when they're there. Don't take sacks, and don't put the ball in danger when you don't have to. Are there times when you have to risk it? Hey, it's a 3rd and now, or we're down, we have to score here anyway, or else the game's over. That kind of thing. Sure, but if you're in the red zone, you're up or even, it's early in the game, let's not lose our chance to get at least 3 points. He's got to be careful with the ball in those situations. Yeah. And Travis Hunter's going to win a lot of things for you, but he's not literally Superman. Don't put him in situations where he's having to fight, 2 or 3 defenders for the ball. But though he's won some of those, sometimes you don't want to get addicted to that. Because that's you too much candy, your teeth will rot out, and that's what that is. That's too much candy when you start getting addicted to a special player making special plays. Let some of your normal players make normal plays too, and then save those special plays when you need them. So my projection, if you want like a numerical projection,
or like a draft round, something.
Oh, I was going to give you like a numbers in terms of his year, but yeah.
Let's do that too.
I think that you're going to get just under 3,200 yards passing, about 3,180, somewhere in there.
32 even would set the school record.
He'll be close. He'll be close. I think he'll come close to it. I think he'll just miss it by a little bit. And I think he's going to run for about. Well, the thing, it's funny in college because they take away sacks. So I guess once you take away sack yardage, I'm thinking somewhere between 490 and 580 yards rushing. But he's gonna have a couple of games where he goes for 70 or 80 yards rushing, even with the sacks. Because he's a good athlete, and teams are going to turn their backs and play man coverage at times, and he's going to take that. I think you're combined between your 2 top runners who aren't Shedeur Sanders. I think you're going to get probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,700 yards rushing between those two, 16, somewhere in that range.
That would be amazing.
And your offensive line is going to struggle at first, just because it's so much newness. So I think you're going to have some rough days at the office early on. But I think around week 4 or 5, you're going to see that unit start to gel. Your running game, which will struggle early on, will start to have some good days. And Shedeur will not have to move around so much because he can move around a bit, but you'd prefer that he not have to move so much. But it'll be, I say good for him. It'll be good for him in the sense that he had a lot of clean pockets at Jackson State.
Yeah.
He's going to have to deal with some pockets with some grit, some filth, a little bit of that more and more often. But he'll adapt to it. I think he has the mental and physical toughness not to get too freaked out by it. But he'll make some mistakes because he's a young quarterback.
Totally. And in terms of his draft future, where does he stack up right now to other guys that have gone first round from the FCS level?
So partially because the guys you're talking about, Joe Flacco, Carson Wentz, and Trey Lance, all have something in common. They're 6'4" and up. And while they'll give you a little bit of a dispensation if you're at Oklahoma and you're 5'10", or if you're at Wisconsin and you're 5'10" and 5'8", or they'll give you a little. But even then, I mean, Russell was pick 76 in the 3rd round. So there's still, obviously Kyler sort of changed things by going as early as he did. But Shedeur isn't short. I mean, he's not short like that. He's probably going to measure in at close to 6'1", and he's, like I said, I think they list him in the 2 teens now, but I don't buy it. I think he's probably a little lighter than he's listed, but we'll see. But I think he can get to well into the 2 teens. At this moment, he's probably considered a second to 3rd round guy, depending upon how he tests and things like that. But could he turn to a first rounder? Of course. Yeah. I mean, think of where Kenny Pickett was. I mean, people were, before he got drafted, the year he went into, people were talking about him in the 4th and 5th round. So this year is going to be a huge year for him. He's now 21 years of age. He's been a leader. He's a guy that people sort of rally around. Like I said, he's got enough mental and physical toughness. My guess, he's probably about 208, 211, somewhere in that. I want to see him put on maybe another, like I said, 8 to 10 pounds. And I think he will. I think that the biggest thing for him just is, like I said, taking those free yards, getting the ball out of your hands, letting people do things with it. He does have more than enough arm strength. That's not a question to me. I think his arm strength is there. I think it's David, like the Carr brothers, David, Derek Carr level arm. Maybe not Elway, maybe not Vic, maybe not Mahomes or Josh Allen. I mean, those guys are freak shows. But he's solidly in that next tier to me. Somebody mentioned Alex Smith, but he's got more arm than Alex Smith. He's got a bit. He's above the Alex Smith Mariota line in terms of arm strength. Like I said, close to a guy like Carr, above a guy like Breeze in that. Tannehill, Carr range in arm strength. Solidly in that well above average, but not quite freak show arm strength tier. And once again, he's 21 years old. He's not done developing, so he could gain a little more gas on it as he gets a little bigger physically.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to see where he goes the next couple of years. I think he'll stay for his senior year. But if you have time, wanted to talk a little bit about the defensive side of things.
I have time to talk defense because that's my favorite thing to discuss.
Okay,
so I always have time for defense.
Let's go ahead and start with. Let's stay in the Sanders family. Let's talk about your assessment of Shiloh.
So Shiloh is an interesting prospect. I'll be honest, I thought he was overhyped initially, and I don't think I was wrong. I think that he, being named Shiloh Sanders helps. It doesn't hurt being named Shiloh Sanders. And people had expectations. And I think now, he's been around the block a little bit, and he's settled in what I think is a better position for him. He played a little corner earlier on, but now he's playing safety, which I think is better for him. He's a heady guy. He's a smart guy. He's not like his dad athletically, but who is? Right. That'd be a lot to ask. So he's not a world-class athlete. No, he's not. He's a solidly good football player in all areas. A kid who can come down into the box at times. He can cover slots. He can cover tight ends. He can cover running backs out of the backfield. Unlike his father, I say unlike his father. I'm kidding, but he's a good tackler. His father was not a terrible tackler. His father just tackled cautiously. Would be a probably way to put it. But Shiloh will throw his body around a little bit. He's a little bigger than his dad, a little thicker in the chest and arms than his father was at the same point developmentally. Shiloh will probably play in the low 200s in the NFL, and Deion was, I think, 187 when he showed up at Florida State and didn't gain much weight. He was still not a guy that really loved the weight room. Deion knew where his money was to be made, so he lifted just enough, I guess, to not violate team policies or something. But he gained maybe 5 or 6 pounds and played most of his NFL career about 194. Shiloh's already about a couple of pounds above that and will probably play in 202, 203. Mm-hmm. But he's a guy that's probably a late round draft pick. Once again, unless he runs way faster than I think he will, he'll probably run in the upper 4.5s, which isn't terrible. 4.56, 4.57, 4.58, somewhere in there. But he thinks the game at a high level. There's some NFL team will be intrigued and will take him somewhere day 3. And I think he will be initially a reserve, but I could see him becoming an eventual starter.
Yeah, perfect. I'm excited for Shiloh too. I didn't realize this until maybe a couple weeks ago when he made his commitment official, but because he was a college athlete during 2020, he actually still has 2 full years of eligibility left. So
I think he'll use one of them unless he hears things back during the pre-draft process or whatever that tells him no. Okay. But yeah, he's a guy that I think if he has a really good year this year, he's gone. If he struggles, then he might come back for that last year.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about the front seven. This has been something that I think, you identified this at the beginning. This is probably the biggest question mark area for the team. That's how I feel, especially kind of on the interior. But, let's talk about edge, linebacker, defensive line, whether it's Bentley or Jordan Dominic is probably who I'm most excited to see coming over from Arkansas. But who are some guys that you're excited for? What's your assessment on this group? And maybe some sleepers to watch out for.
Okay, so I'm more than happy. Sleepers are one of my favorite things to discuss.
Cool.
So this is a almost entirely remade defense, as I'm sure you know.
Absolutely.
There are very few familiar faces on defense. There's a sprinkling of guys on the offensive line who survived, whatever. But I mean, your defensive line is just all dudes who, like I said, the whole, my name is, I came here from. So Dominic's a double transfer, right? Georgia Tech by way of Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
So he's definitely a guy who's used to making introductions. Things that you like about him: he's got an NFL body, right? He looks like he belongs. He's a guy that does clearly know how to find his way to the weight room. And while he hasn't been extraordinarily productive, he's had some games where he showed up. I'd like to see him be more consistent in terms of the impact that he makes. He's also decent against the run. Not great, but decent against the run. But mostly he's there to try to improve your pass rush, which, once again, I'm not going to belabor the point, but was at times almost completely non-existent in certain games. So if you can at least, even if you're not getting a bunch of sacks, if you're at least getting consistent pressure, two things happen. One is you speed up the quarterback. His decision-making degrades because he's worried. And then the second thing is he stops finding big plays, right? He's not even looking for them anymore. He's just trying to get the ball out of his hands. So it means it makes it easier to play deep defense because one, the ball's coming out quicker, and two, the quarterback is losing that aggressive mindset of trying to drive the ball down the field because he's, having to reset his speed and slide in the pocket. So if Jordan Dominic, and I'm interested in his partner in crime, Derek McClendon II.
Yes.
Okay, good. You are as well.
Yeah.
I think that he might actually be the one that leads your team in sacks this year.
Okay.
So things I like about him. One, he has, not that arm length is everything, but he has the long arms. Okay. And the advantage that gives you, obviously, is just like being the gunfighter who's got the quicker draw. You get there first, right? The idea, the fact, getting your hands on the blocker before he gets his hands on you means that you get to decide if it's going to be a slow dance, right, or a fast dance. You get to decide if we're going left or going right. You get to decide things. The person who gets the first touch gets to set the tempo. So if a pass rusher is consistently touching the blocker first, you get to dictate what's going to happen next, especially if you have counter moves. That's the big question for both these guys. Most of these guys have been basically two-move guys. Club rip, climb the outside shoulder, a little bit of swim. I like to see these guys add more moves and time up those moves better, because if that can happen and you have a talent increase just by them being here, now you get to have a pass rush that starts to get some work done. And then on the interior, once again, some more my name is. I think both Chaz Wallace and Shane Cokes are guys that we're going to see some good things from.
Yes.
And I'll start with Cokes. Once again, FCS guy, one of my guys. And it's exciting. I get excited when guys transfer up because, I watch Dartmouth, but I don't think most people do. He was an unstoppable killing machine at times when he was at Dartmouth. Now, obviously, he's not going to look quite as dominant here. But, pardon me for saying this, but he's a very smart player. That's kind of a cliche, but he is. Beyond the Dartmouth stuff, he's a very smart player. He was a guy that super high character. But he's an off-the-charts character, young man. And he does, once again, have 2 years potentially to play because of the COVID thing. And the Ivy Leagues just shut down, right? They didn't even they did nothing. They canceled everything. So he really did truly lose a year. Like some guys, they played some games. Not in the Ivies, they shut everything down. So I think he most likely will play that extra year, partially because he's not really looked at as, a big time prospect yet. But I think he has a chance. He's a guy that did have 8.5 sacks in his time at Dartmouth and showed good timing, he bats down balls. I saw him chase down screens from the backside. So his effort was always there. And he's lost some weight. Once again, I think he knows he's going to have to do some running. So he's a slightly undersized D tackle, but he's very active and he's got good strength. So I think he'll still be productive, despite having to move up in class or whatever in terms of the talent. I think he'll negotiate that well. And then Chaz Wallace is another player that I think will emerge here. I think this is going to be a good situation for him because, once again, Old Dominion. I'm a Virginian. I grew up. In fact, when I played in college,
Your cup of coffee.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even get to finish the cup, but yeah, I guess I smelled some coffee. But we played actually on their campus. Old Dominion at the time did not have a football program,
Okay.
so at the old Foreman Field on Old Dominion's campus is actually where Norfolk State used to play their home games. So he's a kid that was at Old Dominion, had some good days there, and made the change. Was bought what Deion was selling, and he's going to get a chance to show people what he can do. Once again, a guy that's not the biggest cat in the world to be playing on the interior, but makes up for that with activity and plays with good leverage. Really good effort kid. And when I say, not the biggest, I mean 295-ish is not small, except in the world of playing on the interior of a defense. But he had some really good games. I'll go back to his first time I noticed him was 2021. Flashed, made some good. Had a really good game against FIU. Had a good game against Tulsa. Also played well against UNC Charlotte, which I think is just called Charlotte nowadays. But I'm old, so I keep remembering their old. And then, developed, right? Got better. The next year, he started starting. Had some starts. Even had a blocked kick in 2022, right? So special teams effort. Had a good game against East Carolina and a good game against Coastal Carolina.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and that's a good offense. Like Coastal Carolina's a good team. So if you show up against them, you're playing at a high level.
What about his teammate? Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I was pretty much done with Chaz. Yeah.
I was going to ask about his teammate, Old Dominion. Oh, no, I guess this isn't his teammate from Old Dominion, but another small school guy coming from Maine, Kyrie Mans. Are you familiar with him?
Yes. Black Bear. So when I look at this team's composition, which I always said is, singular, like nobody's ever done it this way before. There are a few players that I think will surprise people. And even if they don't become full-time starters, I think they're going to make an impact. So things I like about Kyrie Mans, instinctive, right? A player that I think has a good sense of when to do things. Timing is one of those things that you only know when someone has it when you see it. Mm-hmm. Like you can't, it's all those things that you can't see it in practice. You can't like guys who have, because that kind of timing, playing, knowing when to make a play or how to make a play shows up almost always just in an actual game because practice is scripted, so the ability to react in real time and make a play when something is unexpected only shows up really in games. And he showed me that he's got instincts, he's got a sense of when and how to make plays. He'll have to fight off some challenges to get playing time. Like this is a good thing, I guess, that there's some actual fights for playing time.
Yeah.
You got some real battles, I think, at some positions. I think you're going to see a bit of a battle at linebacker for some playing time. I think you're going to see, obviously, you've got some enormous upgrades in your defensive secondary, and some of those guys are going to push each other for playing time. I still wish you had a little more depth in terms of the pass rush situation, but you take what you can get, and it is still, like you said, a significant upgrade over what was there in the past. I want to mention at least one other guy amongst the front is Taj Alston, which I discovered sort of by accident. I was watching Mr. Stills, who I'm such a huge fan of, and I'm watching Dante Stills, but I'm noticing other players, and they had this kid who, young man, he's a kid, he's very much a man, who started his career at East Carolina back in 2017 and ended up redshirting, then transferred to junior college, makes his way eventually to West Virginia, and is there from 2019 to 2022. And when I really noticed him, he made a couple of really good plays where they were trying to sucker him upfield, right? And like an influence play where they're trying to get him to shoot a gap and then go in behind him. And I saw him take like that one step and then like read and say like, I'm not taking the cheese. And I like that. I like when when they're inviting you to do something and you're like, wait a second, this is too easy. Like this doesn't feel right. And so I saw him, make some plays like that. I think one year he was their comeback player of the year while he was at West Virginia. So a guy that showed a certain amount of mental toughness, showed a certain amount of persistence, and once again, for an interior player, 8 sacks in really 2 years of playing because 1 year he, was battling injury. So he's a guy that's disruptive. Once again, sort of a tweener, a guy who's going to play probably in the 260 to 270 range. I don't know if you remember a guy like Turk McBride, right? I don't know if that name rings a bell. But he Tennessee guy who knocked around the NFL for about 8 or 9 years. But he moved around. He was one of those guys that, played some 3, some 4-eye, some 5. He's one of those guys that you move around. So I think you're going to have some interesting battles, like I said, for playing time. I want to mention at least one other player that I'm excited about, and that's Trevor Woods.
Let's go.
Your current starting strong safety.
One of the few.
Yeah. So he's a survivor, right? I'm a survivor. So first of all, it shows that he understands like what it takes, because if you survive, you survive. Like you survive for a reason. And I don't have to tell you, he's a guy that plays hard all the time, showed up even as a freshman and, made some plays on defense, made some plays on special teams, blocked a punt against Arizona as a freshman. Just a team captain kind of guy, right? Got some leadership to him. And I think that you're going to see, I think he's going to be one of the top tacklers on the team. Now, the downside is that means that guys are getting into the deeper levels of your defense, but also he's a very aggressive downhill player. So they're going to free him up at times as well. But I think I'm penciling him for somewhere in the like 79 to 90 tackle range. I think he's going to be very active. And at times you're going to let him blitz too. I think he's going to get loosened up to, go make some plays. So watch for him to maybe get some all-conference noise this year.
Okay. I would love that. Let's bookmark that. There are a couple other players that I would like to ask you your thoughts on. One being a former 5-star that's transferring out, part of the edge group as well. Sy'veon Smalls, what's been your assessment of him coming into Washington?
Right.
And then what kind of happened? Yeah, your assessment and, what can you expect or what can we expect from this change of scenery for him?
So I'm glad you asked. And that's a player. I don't know if we were discussing players that left. Okay. So first of all, I mean, this is a guy that I truly believe has a chance to be maybe not a star. Star might be a bit of an exaggeration, but I think he has a chance to be at the NFL level. I think he has a chance to be like a situational pass rusher who produces a lot. Like, even if he's never a full-time starter at the NFL level, I think he has a chance to be a guy that, even if he plays 35, 40% of the snaps, could be a guy that's a 6 to 7.5 sack guy at the NFL level. Things that I like about him. He has a good pass rush plan for a young player. He's physically strong. He's not freaky athletic, but he's athletic enough. Think Tamba Ali, right? Okay. So Tamba Ali is not a guy you describe as a freak, except power-wise. I mean, he was freakishly powerful, but he's not like super bendy. He's not incredibly explosive, right, but he's a powerful kid. Mm-hmm. And I think that as you watch him just learn more about how to shorten the corner, because he's strong enough that he can go at a 305-pound man and take him off balance. Like he can power rush. And I think sometimes younger players don't understand that that power is just as, in fact, sometimes more, because it doesn't, you don't need to dodge anything. You can just come straight at. It's a shorter distance when you're power rushing. And once guys realize that you can be a successful power rusher and then use speed as your changeup, I think if he begins to realize that and leads more into just coming straight at people sometimes, he'll up his sack totals almost immediately.
Yes.
I think he's in once again a good situation because Washington also didn't exactly have a lot of dominant pass rushers. I don't know if you watched them last year, but yeah, they went from like a really good defense a couple of years ago to really struggling also to get consistent pressure on the quarterback. So he has a chance to be the leading sacker on that team.
Yeah. I'm very excited to see where he goes. And yeah, I've seen that a couple commenters have been asking about the same players, which is great. Another one brought up that I want to touch on is Clemson transfer Levante Bentley. I know he hasn't been really a big full-time player yet, but what are some things that you like about him, or things in which he needs to work on?
Sure. Well, I mean, he needs to work on not taking the cheese. We talked about guys that don't take the cheese. He's a cheese taker. He's got some cheese on his breath. He can definitely be influenced, to go some places. And he's a very good athlete. Like, that's the thing you notice right away. Is he's got really good change of direction. He's not huge, but he's got enough size on him. He probably will end up playing at the pro level in the upper 230s. He's listed at 235. He's probably 231. That's not a huge difference, probably, but he's listed at 6 feet. He's probably 5'11 and a half, which is fine. But he's not the biggest cat in the world, but he does move very, very well. And he can cover, which is a must nowadays in football. If you're a linebacker nowadays and you can't cover, then you're a real liability.
Right.
But he can cover. So things that I like about him is he doesn't play scared. He doesn't hesitate. I wish he, like I said, would be a little better about reading keys and not just going with. I don't know what he's going with sometimes. I mean, sometimes he's executing exactly what his responsibility is in terms of run, especially in run fits. But at times he can be a little bit of an adventurer, and you don't always like that in linebackers. Like, hey, don't try to discover a new way to make this play or a new way to get there. Just because sometimes you're supposed to be even if the ball isn't going there, you're there to make sure of something.
Right.
Maybe you're protecting against cutback. Who knows? But he has a time. Sometimes he does what we do as viewers: follow the football. Sometimes it's not your job. Sometimes, hey, you're attacking the downfield shoulder of this guard. Don't do something else. So that's the thing. If he just executes, sees his keys, things like that, he'll be fine. He's like I say, he's a good athlete. He's a guy who can cover. He can do a little bit of everything. Not a master of any one thing, but he's good enough at doing a little bit of everything. I'd like to see him, play smarter. Like we're playing. That's the only thing I would say. Is there's times when if it looks too good, it probably is. I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah. Hey, I can just run through this gap. Is there a reason you're just running through this gap? Like, maybe there's a reason that you suddenly have this gap to run through.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I got a couple questions left for you, if that's okay.
I've got a couple more.
One, let's flip to the offense really quick. People in the chat, they're wanting your assessment big time on a Division II transfer that we have. Big 6'4", converted tight end, Javon Antonio. He's been showing up in some Twitter videos right now, just burning past people looking like, Calvin Johnson out there or whatever. But, that's practice. What's your thoughts on him?
Well, he's going to probably be he's in that 3-4 range, like where's your 4?
Yeah.
But the things that I like about him, things that you like about him, I mean, he showed up at Hines, junior college, which is one of the better junior college programs in the country, in Mississippi. And then, Northwestern State, is a really good program. I mean, they have some dudes there. So first of all, Louisiana has a lot of good football players, for those who hadn't heard. And it's not Division II, it's FCS. But Nacogdoches, Louisiana has some dudes. And they play, they play Sam Houston State. They play a lot. They play McNeese. They play a lot of really good football teams. And they hang with them, right? I mean, they play in a good conference, and they've got good players. So things I like about him. Well, you've seen some of the things. My comp for him is Marcus Colston.
Okay, yeah,
Alvin Johnson's a little rich for me.
right.
You may want to pump the brakes just a little on that, but he definitely could become a Marcus Colston type. And so in the red zone, oh yes, he's a guy you should definitely be looking for in the red zone. He knows those subtle little. So I'm a former defensive back. I call these things offensive pass interference, but luckily for wide receivers, the officials rarely call these things.
Yeah.
But he understands those little space creation moves that receivers often get away with. The little nudge, the little this, little that, little but he understands all those big receiver things. He gets away with them more often than not. So that's what you want as a big receiver, is create that little bit of space that allows you to jump up over somebody's head, as you said, and moss them, as they say.
Yeah.
So he's able to do those things. He's got good leaping ability. He's got long arms, big hands. So as he adjusts to the level of athlete he's going to be facing week in and week out, he faced some of those guys before at Northwest State, but he doesn't face them as often. That's the only difference. He would see 3 or 4 guys that would be as good as the guys he's going to face, 8 or 9 this time. So that's the difference. Like 3 times as many sort of NFL types. But yeah, he's not going to be afraid. He's not going to be freaked out. He's going to show up, and I think he could even move beyond. I think right now he's seen as like a 3rd or 4th option, but I could see him pushing his way into getting more opportunities.
Agreed. Okay, with guys like him, I really want your perspective on this, because you see guys like him playing at the FCS level. Thank you for correcting me on that. Okay. But such as also like Christian Watson, 6'5", like bunch of speed. Why do these guys? Why do they not end up in the Power 5 initially?
Okay, it's 2 reasons. One is just the math, right? It's not like I'm once again super old, so I can remember a little bit of the days before the 85 scholarship limit. The 85 scholarship limit changed everything. And it meant that it used to be called defensive signings. And I don't mean signing guys to play defense. I mean signing them so somebody else couldn't have them. So there were times when guys like Bear Bryant and, John McKay and, Bud Wilkinson, back in the 60s and 70s would sign players they had no intention of playing, but wanted to make sure somebody else couldn't have them. And so before there was a scholarship limit, you could have as many players you could sign as many players as you want. You want to put 200 guys on scholarship? Go crazy, right? So the modern recruiting environment would be impossible if they still had the old days where the top 10 programs could literally stash away the top 1,500 players because there was no scholarship limit. So that's part of it, just the math. 2, reputation matters to me a little too much in high school recruiting circles. So the reputation of the program, the reputation of the conference. I'm saying I don't care about that stuff, but I just look at the player. If a player is at a bad program, at a bad conference, but just killing everything in his path, and no one seems to do anything with him, I'm not going to say, well, he's at a bad conference and a bad program. I'm going to say, well, this guy's a beast. Would I like to see him against better competition? Yes. But if a guy's a beast, he's probably a beast, period. Would Christian Watson have been a beast at a better program? Yes. And he was at a decent program, not a top program, a decent program in high school. That's a strange miss there. Come on, South Florida, get on your game. I mean, he's playing in your own backyard. You can't miss on guys like that. But in the case of Javon, he's from Laplace, which is a medium-sized city in Louisiana. There have been some decent players that have come out of Laplace, but his particular high school program was not a powerhouse or a juggernaut, and he wasn't in an offense that maybe fully highlighted him as a player. But he went to East St. John, and it was a good player there. I just don't think people fully saw what he was. Now, once again, the why is an excellent question. But he was all district, They had back-to-back 7-3 seasons as junior and senior year. So it's not like they were trash, but they weren't like a powerhouse. They weren't Evangel or something like that. Those powerhouse programs down in Louisiana, people like, or Saint, what you call it? Or, the one where all the Mannings go.
Oh, yes. I should know this.
I should too. I do know it, but it's, it almost came back to me. It's like a woman's name. Oh God. But there's whatever, not Edna Kinner. That's whatever. The point is that there's power. It wasn't one of those juggernaut programs that everybody pays attention to, and I think that's a mistake. I say you just look at the players, don't worry about the programs. But he was a guy that was a good basketball player too. Played both.
Newman, Chris.
Yes,
McCoy.
Cardinal Newman and Archbishop Newman, right? Archbishop. Sorry,
Chris
Archbishop. Yes. So. But like it wasn't one of those programs that everybody knows. Like that people say, "Oh yeah, they're great every year." It wasn't one of those programs. It was a solid, like I said, 7-3. Last 2 years he was there, all conference or all district, but not a guy that everyone talked about. I think he was seen as a 1-star or 2-star by some recruiting services. Now, how does a guy that size, that speed, how's that happen? I can't answer that one for you. I don't work the way a lot of recruiting services work. I think a lot of them really play too much into, like I said, they look at certain power conferences, power programs, and push guys up. And I've seen guys at Bishop Gorman who are backups being talked as 4-stars.
Yeah,
I mean, I did it's Bishop Gorman, but no.
Was it Tate Martell that went to Bishop Gorman?
Yeah, but it would Tate Martell's backup, who I thought was the better player with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Yeah. But yes, they were both there at the same time. And I remember watching Tate Martell and thinking, this is, like that scene where it says, "This is your God." I was amazed that this is the number, some people playing the number one quarterback prospect in the country. This guy. And I literally thought that Dorian Thompson-Robinson, when I saw him play in, because they blew out a lot of people, he got to play a lot. And I'd see him finish games and think, I know the game's kind of decided, but I like this guy better. I like everything about this guy better. So I feel a little bit smart in liking Dorian Thompson-Robinson better than Tate Martell, who is now a crypto guy, I think, in case you're wondering.
Oh, man. Life comes at you fast.
Life does come at you fast. And he's like doing the NFT crypto thing now. But yes, I'm not a big fan of the way that high school recruiting services rate players, I guess is what all that was to say. But it happens all the time. I could give you a very long list of amazing freak show players that somehow people were like, when they were in high school. DeMarcus Ware, 1-2-star. Now, in their defense, he was mostly being recruited at those days as a possession receiver.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He came to Troy as a 6'3", 196-pound possession receiver. He is a guy that had a late growth spurt, as you may have noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't give them all the blame for that, but there's lots of guys that there should be some blame attached. Like, really? Because, like I said, they look so much at reputation. This guy's at this program, Jimmy Clausen, all the Clausens, at Oaks Christian, and Oaks Christian is always up there, and I get it, but Jimmy Clausen seemed his advantages were all advantages that you could see were going to go away when he played against better players. To me, you could see it. He had great anticipation for a high school kid. He had great, but he's been coached so well. His brothers had worked with him. He had really great coaching. He went to all the best camps and all stuff. But he was a guy who didn't have a great arm strength. He wasn't athletic, and he wasn't super mentally tough. So to me, I wasn't surprised when he ended up struggling later on. It is the transition from high school to college is a very dramatic one. But not just for football reasons, right?
Yeah.
High school is different from college, like beyond the football stuff. So some people struggle just with that because when you're in high school, you're very often, unless you're one of those kids that moves around or transfers a lot, which happens a lot nowadays. But in the old days, these were very often guys that you'd known when you were 7, 8, 9 years old. A lot of times you went to the same elementary school, then you went to the same middle school or junior high school, then you go to the same high school. Now, like I said, because of whatever goes on nowadays. Sometimes kids are, oh, you're from Alabama, but now you're going to school in California.
Yeah.
How does
I
that
feel like I
work?
see it all the time in like Florida. I feel like kids
Like
transfer high
Florida,
schools like
these
every
kids who
year.
are from like nowhere near Florida are suddenly playing at
Yeah.
IMG. It's we live in a very strange world. But in the old days, at least, and Jimmy Clausen is the old days now, I guess. Guys usually played with guys they'd known since they were very young, and they've developed these great bonds with and all that kind of stuff. So some of Jimmy Clausen's success was surrounding talent. Some Oaks Christian was loaded. Some of it was, it's coaching. He'd been very well coached, and he was a smart guy. But he also was a guy that like repeated the 8th grade just for football reasons and stuff like that. So some of that stuff.
The old John Elway, that type of thing.
So some of that stuff catches up with you later, though, right? Because you can't keep repeating grades. I mean, at some point,
Right.
the playing field levels, and you're playing against guys who are as good as you, and that's the real test. And so when the jump from college to pro, the main difference is it's all football stuff. Like, but you're not. But it's not all the cultural. Well, sometimes it's cultural. Like Carson Wentz is a guy that had always been a small town kid, and now he's in Philadelphia. I think that was a bit of a problem for him too. It's like, where do you duck hunt around here? So I guess that was a bit of an issue for him too. Where can I get deer urine? So I think he struggled with also some of the cultural stuff too. Did fish out of water. But when you're a kid from a small town, or a kid from a certain environment, and all of a sudden you're in this radically different environment, and you're doing college level coursework, and you add to that, the extra pressures and all that kind of things. Sometimes the stuff that causes a kid to not make it have nothing to do with football. I've seen loads of kids not make it for non-football reasons. Some kids just can't do college level coursework, and they've been protected while they're in high school various ways, and sometimes that protection doesn't work out at the next level. And sometimes some schools do find a way to keep, sort of protecting certain athletes, but that's a whole other show. You don't have time to get into that show, but that one gets deep too. But not every school does that. Some schools are like, hey, we have study hall, we have tutors, we have this, but you got to do your work.
Yeah.
And some guys aren't used to that. When you say do my work, you mean weight room, film?
Yeah.
Wait, you mean sociology? So and that's how you get quotes like, I didn't come here to play school. So and some guys struggle with that, with the school part of it. And like I said, other things. I do want to talk about one or two more players before we close out, because
yes,
that is why you brought me here, I think. So I want to talk at least one or two more guys in your defense, and I'm going to start with one of the more underappreciated players, and a position that used to be underappreciated, but I think people now appreciate more, is the nickel. And so right now you've got Miles Slusher, another all-name team member, who is currently penciled in, and yet another former Arkansas Razorback. Well coached once again. They have a very good coaching staff at Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
And he's another guy that's got toughness. An Oklahoma kid originally.
Yeah.
And he's going to make some plays. He is not afraid to stick his face in the fan. Not afraid of much of anything that happens on a football field. And, a good blitzer. I think he had 9 tackles for loss as a safety in his Arkansas career. A couple of sacks. I think maybe 2.5 sacks. He forced some fumbles. He, also made plays in the passing game. Had a couple of interceptions.
Yeah.
He's not a huge ball skills guy, but you've got people for that, as I'm sure you've heard. So if he's the enforcer back there, and I think that's really what his role will be, he could be one of those tough guy nickels, right? Some nickels are basically just a third corner, but he's a guy that's got a little safety to him too. Like he's got some of that. He's got some of that blunt force trauma in his game.
Yes.
So I think he's going to change the mindset of your secondary, because you didn't have a lot of people getting rocked. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean once again, but
it's okay.
I didn't see people tiptoeing through the secondary before. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
I think he may light a couple people up, and that may change some things. And you're not allowed to hit people the way you used to be allowed to hit people, but he's
Right.
going to hit people up to the level you can
Yeah.
in today's football. So I'm excited about him. And backing him up is another somewhat interesting player to me, who I think has a chance to make an impact. Maybe he'll play some dime. And he's a guy who comes from Alabama. So once again, super well coached. Jacques Robinson is a guy that I think we'll see some. And once again, injuries happen. But if he's forced to play some corner, I don't think he'll hurt you. If he's forced to play some safety, I don't think he'll hurt you. He's long also. Note Seattle Seahawks fans. He does look like a Seattle Seahawks safety. He really does. He's got the long legs, the long arms. He's fairly physically strong for a slender guy. And I think he'll push to get some playing time. And, whether it be a corner, a nickel, maybe even as like a third safety, there's some things to like there. I mean, the kid's legitimately like 6'1.5" and probably like 196, 97, somewhere there, like probably a little shy of 200.
Yeah.
And, at Alabama, he just got lost in the sauce a little bit. They liked him coming in, but there's just, it's Alabama. I mean,
yeah.
Not much else to say there. I mean,
not
it's
too
just
much of a knock, yeah. Like,
I mean,
Charles Kelly wanted to bring him over here. That should speak,
right, exactly. I mean, he dressed out about 6 or 7 times, I think, in his, suited up, got on the field a few times, but it's he has a half sack in his. I mean, I had a punt block. He has a half sack. Not to compare us, because he's like light years from what I was as a player. But I'm just saying that he got frustrated. He was there for 3 years and, didn't really get a chance to do much except a little bit of special teams. And, like I said, I think he got, a handful of snaps in about 4 or 5, maybe 6 games on defense, but usually in like a mop-up role. I think that he'll play some this year, but I think that his breakout is really more next year. He'll be there unless something strange happens for his senior season, and I think that'll be the breakout year for him. His redshirt senior year, I wouldn't be surprised if he was a starter, full-time starter, and once again, a guy that might even push for like all conference, if not first team, maybe second team kind of stuff, because he's got the talent, and he's now in a situation where, well, one, he's working with Deion Sanders, can't hurt, but also, even with the influx of talent, there's still opportunities because so many things are still in motion and in flux.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Bill Carroll, for your time. I want to leave you with this last question, and definitely have you on again before the season starts, because there's still so many players that we want to talk with you about that we didn't get to.
Right, because like we talked about, it's an entirely new football team.
Yeah, we got 85 guys legitimately to talk about, but just a quick prediction. If you had to make a prediction, how many times next April do we hear players called from the University of Colorado during the NFL draft?
I think you've got 3 or 4 guys with a really good chance to get drafted. I think that, and some of it comes down to how many guys declare also.
Right.
Which, was not so much a problem in as you said, in the last maybe year or two. Guys didn't have to worry about deciding to come out early or not. Now you have some guys have some actual decisions to make. So my I think the over under is around 4. I think 3 at least are pretty much definite. And your defense so far is ahead of the offense, I think, in terms of guys that get drafted this year. Okay. I think that most of Kavasi Smoke is a guy that might get drafted. He's super off the charts, but he probably won't. He doesn't look like a guy to do that. He's probably a guy that's going to be a highly prized, though undrafted free agent, and I can see him making a team. I think you, for the first time in a while, may even have an offensive lineman drafted. It's not impossible.
Yeah.
And my money, if I were a betting man, which I'm not really, but if I were a betting man at the moment, I think an emerging talent on your offensive line is a former Kent State guy named Jack Bailey. Came there with Coach Lewis. I could see him being a pleasant surprise for some people. So you could have even one offensive lineman, at least one, drafted. I could see a couple of guys sticking in a camp from your offensive line. I think Shedeur, as you said, he probably comes back. But if he doesn't come back, he's going to be drafted probably later rather than earlier. Once again, unless he has an amazing year, which he could.
Yeah.
I think that on defense, both the pass rushers we talk about, if they have good years, get drafted.
Agreed.
Right? Those guys have a shot. And then Shiloh, I mean, he has 2 years of eligibility, as you mentioned. But if he has a huge year or even a very good year, he comes out and probably gets drafted late. He's a guy that's probably a 5th or 6th rounder, but unless he tests way better than I think he will. And then, I mean, even on offense, some of the wide receivers, if one of them really emerges, the aforementioned Mr. Javon Antonio, if he pushes, let's say halfway through the season, he's been a guy that's playing, more in that second, unit, and then something happens, whether it be injury or him just outplaying somebody, and he closes out the year strong, gets invitation to say the East-West Shrine game, blows it out there, maybe gets the call up to the Senior Bowl as a late replacement to the Senior Bowl, shows up last couple of practices and blows people's minds there too. Maybe he gets a combine invite. He could get drafted.
Yes.
Because he's got components that NFL teams like. Oh, you move well, you're big, and you can jump over people and catch footballs consistently. We may have a place for you.
Right. Yes. Agreed. Well, Bill, thanks again. This means so much that you would hop on my show, and I mean, I can't believe we talked for this long. It absolutely.
I can't either. So one thing I'll leave you with, David. My co-host, shout out to my co-host Brock Vieira on College Football Forecast. When we do our conference previews, since turnabout is fair play, I will invite you to come on when we talk Pac-12.
Oh, I would love that. Yes.
Okay,
count
good.
me in. Just message me on Twitter. We can get
No,
it.
I will.
And yes, just thank you again. One of my good friends, Vibe Season, is chiming in here. He said this was the most informative interview I've seen in quite some time. Bill, you are a well of knowledge, and it means so much that you would take time sharing some of that knowledge with us. So hopefully we can have you on again.
I promise this is not the last time you and I will chop it up. And yeah, I definitely. My hope is that we will meet again, not just but towards the end of the season or even after the season. Thank you, Nicholas. And Mr. Braxton, I want to talk to you. But at some point, I want to sort of do what's the word? Not post-mortem, but yeah, I mean, like a look back. Because I'd love to see how wrong or right I was about some of the things we discussed. And if you guys do make it to 6 wins, contract extension time, right? You probably want to add a couple more years to the end of that contract. If he gets to 6 wins, because I mean, if Texas is bad again, they're gonna, just all those spoiled programs will be like, really? He won 6 games out of the box? It's gonna. I don't know what the buyout is, but teams like LSU don't care. You know what I mean? They don't care.
It's $10 million after this next year.
Yeah, LSU's got $10 million.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, if you guys get to 6 wins, yeah, I would say tack on a couple more years and maybe up that buyout.
Yes. Fun fact: last time CU won a bowl game was 2004, before YouTube was launched. So we are due. If Coach Prime gives us a bowl win year 1, I'm ready to build the statue, even while he's the current coach.
There you go. Statue, contract extension, double the buyout. Yeah, not even in that order. You may want to double the buyout first. But yeah, David, it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk again soon. And have a fantastic evening. And again, thank you for all the work that you do, Bill.
Yep, this is why I do it, so that I can hop on. If you do like what I do, please, I have some articles dropping soon on Team MBS Media, and then you'll get to see this young man and I, our team MBS Media, because he'll join us for our Pac-12 preview. We're going to kick off our college preview season literally tomorrow with our transfer portal, which is very Colorado-centric, special. We'll talk about the transfer portal, so Colorado will definitely be mentioned. And then we'll start working alphabetically. So it'll be like ACC. So we'll work our way towards the Pac-12 being about, I can't do the math in my head, but probably sometime in late July. I don't know. I have to figure it out. But I'll reach out to you.
Okay, that sounds perfect. All right. Well, Bill, thanks again. All the commenters, thank you for chiming in and making this show so collaborative. So I'll catch all of y'all later. And until next time, Go Bucks.
Yes. Thank you so much. I have a friend I'll have to tell you about, or tell him about this, named Cole Cameron and Chase Cameron. And Chase is I guess the term long suffering has to be used now. But he was there like just towards the end as a student, just towards the end of the good times. And then